Hello there and welcome to an extra special Tom's Warhammer Minis tutorial. Today I am celebrating 3,000 followers on my Instagram, and in the recent poll my followers voted on Rotigus being painted in the box art colour scheme using my contrast style of painting. But firstly and most importantly, a huge thank you to all 3,000 followers and all that come after. You've all joined me on my personal hobby train, and you've each impacted me positively on this awesome hobby journey. Rotigus, though. He is the greater demon of Nurgle, and he is the most generous one. Repugnant life follows in his wake, and he enjoys his work more than any other. His twisted magic allows the gift of Papa Nurgle to truly flourish in ways that make sick buckets completely pointless. For many years I have wanted this model, but my mind is very literal in how I do things. Now, as a named character, he has to be, in my point of view, painted in box art colours. I don't mind him seeing in other colours from other people's work, but for me, it has to be exact. And for many years, I was clueless. There has been no guide. No guide has existed that I could find. Games Workshop have never made one, and his colour scheme is rather tricky to work out until you know how. And when he was painted by the Heavy Metal team, contrast paints did not exist, and it is practice and experience that has allowed this tutorial to come into fruition. The tutorial is for all of you out there, like me, who wants Rotigus to be matching the box art colour scheme. This is a big, complex guide that I've made as straightforward as possible. Now, while he can absolutely be painted in 1 to 2 days, I really would recommend taking your time here. He is a centerpiece model. You want him to look fantastic. So without further ado, grab your paints and grab your brushes, and let's get hobbying. Now, before we start painting Rotigus, it's always good just to point out a couple of things. So my model is primed fully in White Scar. As you can see, I've already applied texture to the base. And the texture paint I've used here, of course, it's going to be your choice what you do, but I've gone with Sterling Mud. Now, I've applied it to begin with, because we can always apply tufts and stuff if we accidentally catch paint on it. But there's certain areas that are going to be hard to reach. So you've got areas between his foot here, areas between the foot under here. And to me, it's important to get this done first. We don't want to do a really beautiful paint job and then ruin the model. Because even though you can't see it, I've caught mud in certain places and it needs touching up. And you don't want to do that at the end because it is just such a beautiful model. It's going to stand out like an eyesore. So I've done it now. I've let the paint fully dry, say the texture paint fully dry. And the small areas that I did catch, I've just relayered with White Scar. Literally, if you do get a bit of stellar mud, say I've got a bit here, just get a dry brush, damp it, get most of the texture paint off. It's going to be stained brown, and you can just relayer with White Scar. So it won't have the texture in the sense of thickness, it will just have a bit of a staining, and you can correct it. So do that bit if you are wanting to get it done like I'm doing, and then we can start painting him. So to begin with, we need a foundation colour for all of the skin of Rotigus, and unlike the Great Unclean One models, his skin on the box art is not actually green, it is this sickly brown, very pale brown tone. Now the colour I'm using here is Aggaros Dunes. Now Aggaros Dunes is a really good paint for doing skin. If you've ever painted Hobgrots, it's that kind of colour. But over such a large surface area, we don't want dry lines, and on its own, in its purest form, it is quite a strong colour. So I've created a rather large mix in the Citadel Skull palette of roughly 1 part Aggaros Dunes to roughly 3 to 4 parts of Lamia Medium. It's quite a heavy mix, and that Lamia Medium is going to really help the flow. We want to take it section by section. So I did it to the hands. You've got all these muscle areas here. So you can do up to the hand, say up to there, finish that on the other side, then paint that section, do the other hand. Really use the muscles to help you do it step by step. As I say, we're painting this mixture all over. Take your time. There's a lot to cover. Now, granted his skin is a lot lighter than this. We are going to be adjusting that later on with highlights as well as other shades and other colours. But getting that foundation on now is very important. I'm going to shade it down in the next stage. So get it all painted and let it completely dry before moving on. Next up, we want to add some more definition to that Aggaros Dunes, so I'm shading it down with a very subtle paint. The colour I'm using here is Mortarium Grime. Now I have thinned it down ever so slightly. We're creating a 2-to-1 mix, so 2 parts Mortarium Grime to 1 part Lamium Medium. And exactly the same as before, take it section by section, but as a shade paint it is a lot thinner, so we need to check for pooling. Don't apply too much on your brush, especially when you get into these thicker recesses. You don't want gravity to take it all the way down. So start from the top, work your way down, keep an eye for pooling. It just adds a bit more richness to that Agros Dunes colour we've base coated in. Next up, I'm going to start highlighting the skin now. And it's important to do it now before applying other details because it's really going to work to advantage, and I'll explain that in a second. Now the colour I'm using here is Pallid Witch Flesh, and we've got quite an advantage with this unique model. There are lots of raised areas, lots of edges to catch. It is perfect for dry brushing. And the dry brush I used here is the Citadel medium-sized dry brush. It really catches all the details. We don't want it too big, we don't want it too small, we just want it just perfect. So you want a kind of soft to medium strength dry brushing method just to catch all the areas. We don't want to go too hard where we end up chipping the model because we want to have this underlaying colour as the default. Now the reasons why we're applying it now, it doesn't matter if we catch the white because Pallid Witch Flesh is very bright. It's also, there are going to be areas of the model that are going to remain in this default colour at the very end. So getting those highlights in place now just saves time. But also, there's going to be a lot of edges that we're going to catch that we're going to be painting in different colours. Now, as it's now lighter, it's going to provide a natural highlight when we apply future contrast paints, which means in some areas, we're not going to have to apply future highlights. So it's a clever little trick. It's worthwhile getting it done now. Next up, I'm taking Gore-Grunter Fur, and I thin this in a 2-to-1 mix. So 2 parts Gore-Grunter Fur, 1 part Lamium Medium. And I'm applying this in select areas. And these areas are all of the cracked areas around Rotigus. There aren't many. You've got one on the back here. You've got one around the pussy spots here on the foot. Back of his foot there. You've got one on the side on his leg there. You've got one on the arm here. You've just got one under the arm there. So there's not many to do. Now, take this one for example. Paint a small area with the Gore-Grunter Fur. Wash your brush, and while the brush is damp, not completely wet, just damp, just feather out the paint this way or towards the skin so you get a nice natural transitioning blend from the cracked area to the flesh. Take your time and do that over all of those different areas. And then while that's drying, I've also painted the toenails as well as the fingernails. Nice and simple, just a coat of Agrax Earthshade. Traditionally, we view pus spots as yellow, and the Great Unclean variant has quite a lot of these. But with Rotigus, the heavy metal team, they've painted most of them in green, but there are a few exceptions, and we're going to paint and base coat those now. So the colour I'm using here is Nazdreg Yellow, and there's only a few areas I'm applying this. So you've got this whole section of giant spots and boils here, and then on the front we just got 3 little ones to pick out. So you've got the one here, one there, and just one there, where the cracking is. So we apply that, and then moving on, we're going to tint certain sections of his skin using Targor Raid Shade. Now you've got lots of varying skin tones, but this one we're going to apply in select areas. So starting on this foot here, this left foot, we're going to paint not the toenails, but the toes. We're going to bring the paint up to this level here, go around the whole back of his heel and foot, and then for his whole backside, starting from here all the way to the base, we're painting this entire section across. Bring it up around all these spots and boils, and then drop it all the way back down here, leaving this section clear in the base coat. But we're going to paint the heel, bring it right down the bottom, cross all the toes at the front, leaving this whole section in the base coat colour. Then you've got this bit of fat here, which we're painting Targor Raid Shade. We're going to leave this in our base coat, but we're going to bring it straight up all the way just to this point here. And then with the Targor Raid Shade, I've just done the under part of the belly right under here, which is a bit hard to see, but we're giving it that there. And while I had this paint to hand, I've shaded all the soil, the stone and mud that I've done to begin with. Makes sense doing it now. So it's very select areas, really copying the box art just to get a slight transitional colour shift that's slightly different from the base coat colour. It's nice and simple, it's just knowing where those areas are. Next up, I'm taking Sigvold Burgundy. Now I thin this down ever so slightly, but we're not talking an actual ratio mix here. It's just a drop of lamy medium to help with the flow, because we've been covering this large area. Now the beauty of the headcloth, you've got these little splits in the fabric where it's stitched together, so we can take it section by section, which is going to avoid any pooling or any drying lines. We can just move the brush, but always start, say you start here at the beginning, always start at the top, go down. Gravity is going to pull the paint downwards, and we don't want to excessively put it in any certain area. Now using that same mix, I painted the inside of this mouth, the inside of the mouth that's attached to the arm, and then you've got the belly mouth. Now the belly mouth, I want to make a real point here. You're going to catch details. Now I recommend using a frayed, damaged old small layer brush, because you're going to need to get into really tight corners. You're going to catch these edges regardless. But using a frayed, damaged old brush is much better, because if you use a new brush, you're going to end up splitting bristles, getting paint into the ferrule. It's going to ruin a brush. So really take advantage of the fact that it's uneven, it's a pain in the backside to get to, but do it now. Use an old brush. Don't worry about these details. We're going to pick them out in White Sky in the next bit just to fix them. Now while that's all drying, I'm moving on to the puff spots that we did earlier in Nasdaq Yellow, and I'm shading them simply in Berserker Blood shade. Gives it a darker, slightly red tinted look, makes them look a bit iller. Moving straight onto the back, I'm taking pure Gore-Grunter fur, and just like the Sigvald Burgundy, I thinned it down ever so slightly, just a couple of drops of lamy medium to help with the flow. We're not talking a ratio, I want that rich natural colour. Now I recommend just starting in the corner here, just apply it over the top section, then start in the corner over here, apply it in the bottom half, and just move it from left to right and cover the whole area. I'm going to make it a bit darker to match the box art, but like we did at the very beginning, we want that underlaying colour, because we're going to use a different contrast paint to really enrich the colour overall. So we'll do all those, and then we'll let them dry. Next up, we're taking Carroburg Crimson, and I'm using this to shade all of our Sigvald Burgundy details. So exactly like before, take it one section at a time on the headcloth. Again for the mouth, we've got it in here, we've got it in here, we've got it in here. Let it dry completely, and then we can move on to the next stage, and that is going to be Darko Flesh. And as you can see, I've painted this over all of the exposed inner flesh wounds. So around the mouth of the stomach, you've got the tongue and the face that's here, you've got the open wounds and gashes, you've got his nipples that I'm doing it on, there's little wounds on his neck, and then you've got these big open sores all over his back. So where there's open exposed flesh, that's where applying it. Now it is pink, it is raw, it is bloodied on the box art. We work to that later. This is the underlayer, like I've mentioned. Contrast paints work really effectively, especially on organics like this, where you've got a nice underlayer where the eye starts to visually see it as this is exposed raw flesh. So we'll get that done, let it dry completely, and this is the perfect opportunity to fix all of our mistakes that I talked about earlier. So I'm taking White Scar, and applying this over all of the bits that we might have caught Sigvald Burgundy or even Darko Flesh now. So just fix those all. This bit of white fatty fluid, we'll paint that in a different colour, because that's what we're keeping to the box art. So we're not painting that with Darko Flesh, but again correcting it with White Scar if we've caught it. Finally, I'm going to turn to the back, and I've taken Gore-Grunter fur, and I've thinned this down in a 1-to-1 mix with lamy and medium. And exactly like I did with the Gore-Grunter fur, start on the top fold here, and then work your way from left to right, or right to left, whichever way you prefer. And we're just painting this all over to give a much richer, warm brown, leathery look. Next up, we're taking Nuln Oil, and we're treating this as a base coating colour, like a contrast paint. Now I've applied this over the horns, and then all the teeth. And we've got 3 sections of teeth. You've got the main one in his mouth, you've got the little mouth in the arm, and then you've got the belly teeth. Now it's the horns on the head that we need to pay particular attention to. Shade paints are particularly thin. Contrast paints are thin, but shade paints are a lot thinner. So pooling with gravity is going to happen a lot more. So start at the tip, bring the paint all the way down, but keep an eye for pooling. You've got these little deeper recesses within the hood. We can use the pooling to our advantage, but we don't want excessive pooling. We want that nice natural shadow rather than it being too thick, too grungy, and even spilling over slightly. So keep an eye on that as you do it. Now once that's done, and once you're satisfied it's not pooling enough, we're going to create a rather strong glaze mix. So I'm going to take 1 part of gut ripper flesh and roughly 6 parts, maybe even 7 of Lamian medium. So it is very thin. Now we're going to base coat all of these big tentacles. Start at the tip over here, bring it all the way to the tip over here, and then just paint the other side. Keep an eye again, we want a nice even layer. We don't want excessive pooling because it's being very thin. But the Lamy medium is going to help with the drying time, in the sense we shouldn't have any drying lines, as long as you're quick enough. I've also used this to base coat all the little ones, even if they got caught with Agos dunes. Now with this same mix, I'm also going to start tinting the skin. And we can use the box art as reference here, but you don't need to. Essentially, there's 2 different areas. So where you've got big open wounds and open areas, such as the mouth, or even you've got the underarm, these little wounds here, these little wounds here, these ones, we're going around the outside edge in a rather large surface area. We're doing the same for the spots as well. Now you might get a little drying line here. We're going to use this to advantage later on. We don't need to feather it out. But this is for all the spots, for all the open wounds, just a nice large open area. Really starts to tint the skin. When you hold it back, it is starting to look absolutely disgusting, which is exactly what you want for Rotigus. There's a lot to cover. Take your time. Just check for pooling. And yeah, go to town on him. Now it's rather typical of a tutorial. You end up doing a few pieces, you end up missing a few pieces, and there's a couple of things just to note here before moving on. So we got this bit of flesh here that I left white. I did that in the same gut ripper green that was thinned down as the tentacles. Now I said at the beginning there were only 3 Nasdreg yellow spots. Turns out there's a couple more and they're just here. So they're base coated in Nasdreg yellow. If we turn here, we've got this fatty bit of tissue that's just above his left foot. I've painted that in Darko flesh, feathering it out, just to note. Now, moving on to the next colours. Once the horns are completely dry, we're taking Nuln Oil once more. And essentially, we're painting it halfway down and feathering out. To start the tip on the top, just go just a bit further beyond halfway, wash your brush, and while it's damp, not completely wet, just damp, just feather out the Nuln Oil towards the lighter colour, essentially having that nice transition from dark to light. Same for the little horn. It's a lot smaller obviously, but we're just doing a halfway point. Same on this side, and obviously it's done both sides. Then while that's drying, we're creating a 1-to-1 mix of gut ripper flesh and Militarum green. Stir it together in the Citadel skull pad or whatever palette you have. And we're painting this in select areas on the staff. So here, you've got this little bell of the rope. We're painting this entire section front and back. For the middle one, we're going all the way around up to this point roughly here. We don't need to do any feathering or transitioning into a blend. We'll do that in the next stage. For this one, you've got both sides of this one. Go all the way down around his fingers, and then you get to this point just here. And we're painting this bit of the branch, and we're ending just above the mushroom. And what I've done, I've brought it round just to behind the rope there. You can just about see that. And there's a view from the other side of what we've done. So again, the rope ends there. That's the halfway point that matches the other side. And obviously we've painted it exactly mirroring both sides on that side. And then we can move on. We need to let that fully dry though the staff before we paint the other section. Next up, once that green on the tree is dry, we're going to paint all the other bits of wood. And the colour I'm using here is Wildwood. Nice and simple, just applying it in its neatest form. Next up, we're working on the horns again, and I've applied in the exact same we did before, a coat of Nuln Oil. So starting at the top, go halfway down, feathering out exactly the same as before, just to give it a bit more darkness. And once we've done that, while all the other bits are drying, I'm using White Scar again, and I'm using this to relayer all of the maggots around the body. Now generally where you're going to find them, there's no real hidden ones. They are consigned to areas where there are open wounds. So like this, you get one odd one there, but again it's an open wound. Open wound, all the big open wounds, that's where you're looking for. The only real exception is the face. There's just a couple there where it's not an open wound, but then you've got the main sort of open maw of his mouth. So just go around, pick each one out, because we're going to give them a unique colour in the next stage. Now, just to point out, on his staff, I thought there weren't any hidden ones. They were kind of hidden because of the dark colours I used. There are little maggots just dotted around. So you can see them hiding in between, a couple down the side, amongst the hand. If you turn him round, there's a couple around the back here. Now, having mentioned that, we're then going to paint all of our maggots. And the colour I'm using here is Magos Purple. Nice and simply, not thinned down, we're just applying it neatly straight over every single maggot. Now I've also applied this over the mushrooms, and now this isn't the base coat colour that we see on the box art. The one that on the box art is brown. Now if you want to keep it really accurate and really loyal, then the colour you'd want to use is Gorgrunter Fur, but I want to differentiate the colours. We've got a lot of brown going on down here, I just don't want to over brown it. So it's my little take on the thing. Now moving on from that, we're taking Black Templar. And nice and simply, we're just applying it over the ropes. There's not many to do here. You've got the 3 Nurgle items up here on the staff. Turning round, you've got this little bell on the back here. So that's where the Black Templar's applied. Now I also want to shade the staff a little bit more, just to tie the colours together a little bit. And the colour I'm using here is Aphonian Camo Shade. Not thinned down, just applying it straight over all the green, all the brown. And lastly, I'm adding one more layer of Nuln Oil, exactly the same like we did before on the horns, but this time not going all the way half down. I've gone from the top just about there and then feathered it out, so we've got this real transition from dark to light. Next up, I'm creating a 2-part Volupus Pink, 1-part Lamy Medium mix, and I'm painting this over all of the open wounds that we painted in Darko Flesh. Avoid the maggots, be careful going around the teeth and details that we don't want to cover, but we're essentially painting this over all of the exposed raw flesh, as well as the skin that's loosened, which would be the inside rather than the outside. When we get to areas like the tongue, I've painted right into the recess, brought it 2/3 of the way out, washed the brush, and while the brush is damp but not excessively wet, I've feathered out the colour to create a nice transitional blend into a lighter Darko Flesh. The other part to note, obviously we don't want to paint the maggots, but on this part of his hand you've got these exposed bones. I've kept them in a Darko Flesh colour. It's not bone, it just makes it easier to highlight at the end, but I've just painted the exposed flesh that's around. So take your time, get all that done, and while it's drying we can take advantage of getting the metallic details base coated. So to begin with, for all of our silver details, I'm using Iron Warriors, and there's not a lot to do here. But on the actual headcloth, you've got these staples that are here, here, and here. And on the back, you've got the chainmail plate just below the cloth. Obviously, you want to be careful getting underneath. We don't want to catch the skin. Once we've done that, I'm taking Rune Lord Brass, and I'm picking out all the bronze details. So these are the 2 skulls that you see on the cloth here. You've got the 3 trinkets on the staff here. So 1, 2, 3. Go on to the headcloth, you've got 2 skulls here, and you've got 1 skull in the corner there. And next up, I'm creating a 1-to-1 mix of Mantis Warriors and Lamian Medium. And this is where we really start to bring some real detail and definition to Rotigus. So I've base coated all the Nurgling skin. So however many Nurglings you put on your base or model, I've applied it all over their skin. It's bright, it's vivid. We'll do some other bits to them later. But I've applied it to all of the round spots that you see on his skin, and it starts to create this very gruesome, very vivid, very mouldy, pusty. It is rotting. It's Rotigus, essentially. Now I haven't applied it on the spots that are underneath, because when you look at the box art, they are this dull colour that we've created earlier. Same around the feet and the leg here, same on the underbelly here, and then you got this section here. But this area is bright with spots, this area isn't. But anything else on the model, if there's big round pustules, same on the bits here. I've created it with this Mantis Warriors green, and I've used it to base coat the eyes as well. It's bright, it's vivid, it's starting to look absolutely disgusting, and I'm glad. Our next process is going to be a slightly trickier one, and it really needs a lot of understanding and a lot of time involved just to get it looking really good. The colour I'm using here is Archelian Green, and I've created a 2-to-1 mix, so 2 parts Archelian Green, 1 part Lamian Medium. And the Lamian Medium is essential here. We're going to be doing a lot of feathering, and the Lamy medium gives us a lot of leeway without having drying lines. So once again, feathering is where you apply the paint to a certain point, wash your brush, and while the brush is damp but not excessively wet, we're pulling the paint out towards the area we don't want it to be to create a natural transitioning blend. So we're doing this across all the tentacles. Start at the tips, bring it all the way down to where you want to stop it, and then feather it out each section. Take your time, but don't take too much time because there will be drying lines if you take too long. But that's where the Lamy medium comes to apply. I've done it across all the little tentacles. So the best way to show you, you've got all the little tentacles, for example, here. I've just washed the brush and just brushed the tips of each tentacle, the small ones. And then you've got all the open wounds and the big spots. So these Nasdrake yellow spots that I'm talking about. We're applying a section at a time. So for instance, I started here, bring it down to here, stop, wash the brush, feather out that section, apply the next bit, feather it out. It takes a lot of time, but this is what you're going to end up with. This is very much what we see on the box art with Rotigus. So there's a lot to do. Just make sure you've got the Lamy medium to really help the flow and the feathering. Next up, I'm taking Pterodon Turquoise and I'm creating a 1-to-1 mix with Lamy medium with this paint. Now, applying this over different areas. So let's start with the big tentacles only. We're not doing the small ones. We're only focusing on the big ones around Rotigus. So take it at the core of the tentacle. Bring it to about halfway up to where the Achillean green is, and then we're doing that feathering transition blend where we're taking it into the Achillean green. Just creates a dark to light to very bright transition. Now I've also got this paint over all this area of Achillean green that we've done, and this is all the big open wounds, not the little ones. I've done a recessed shade just along that outer edge, just to give it a bit more definition. I've also applied the Pterodon Turquoise into these potted marks. Box art shows he's got these blue potted marks all over. This works really well. Now, if you're doing this Nurgling, I've painted it across the sword. If you've got this Nurgling, I've painted it over his, insectoid claws. So get all that done and we'll move on to the next stage. Next up, we're focusing on the Nurglings, and we're running through a whole list of paints here that we've already used on bits of Rotigus. So for all of the green skin that I did in Mantis Warriors green, I've shaded it with a Phonian Camo shade. With Black Templar, I've painted the horns, I've painted the insectoid claw, and I've painted the sword as well as the rock. With Wildwood, I've painted the straps here, and I've painted the wooden staff, and then the wooden flail staff. With the Lupus Pink, I've picked out the tongues and then the open wounds. And then with Sigfold Burgundy, I've painted the capes. And with Carabao Crimson, once it was dry, I've shaded the capes. Now moving on to the back here, if you're doing this one with the flail, I've base coated it in Bad Moon's Yellow. It's going to be very bright, so you're going to be wondering what I'm doing with it. Just trust the process, you'll find out in the next stage. And then finally for Rotigus himself, on his actual flesh of the head, I've shaded it with Bale Tan Green. So this is the eyes and the face, avoiding all the maggots. Continuing with our Nurglings, I'm taking Skeleton Horde, and I'm placing this over a few certain areas. So all the teeth that's exposed, and then you've got the skull just on the staff of this Nurgling here. Nice and simple. Then, moving on, we're keeping to the same silvers, so I've used Iron Warriors there, but for the flail, the shoulder pad, he's got a little buckle here on the strap and on the back of his robe. If we turn around, you've got the flail here. I've base coated these in Balthazar Gold. And then finally, for that bright yellow flame that we did earlier, I'm now putting a layer of Hex Ray Flame straight over the top of it. You get this real bright, vibrant green blending into yellow. It's not thinned down, there's no feathering at all, you're just applying it straight over. Start from the top, bring it down, check for pooling, but you kind of want a slight pooling in the recesses like I've done here. And next up, it's time to shade our metallic details, and we're keeping it really nice and simple here. So for all the silver details we painted, I'm shading them in Nuln Oil. And then for all of our bronze details, which includes the Balthazar Gold and the Runor Brass, I've shaded it with Agrax Earth Shade. And with that done, Rotigus is at what I would call battle ready. He looks absolutely incredible. You could absolutely just do the base now, finish him off, and he would look incredible, be it in a tabletop, be it in a display cabinet, but we're not leaving him there. We're going to take him to the next stage and we're going to apply some highlights. It's time to begin our highlighting, and we're rather blessed with such a large surface area where there are lots of edges that can be easily caught with a dry brush. So that's where predominantly most of my highlights are going to be aimed at. So to begin with, I've taken Praxity White. I've applied this over the horns. I've applied it over the maggots. Now you can't catch every maggot. There are some that are exposed that you can easily catch with a dry brush, but our real focus here is the ones that are pouring out of his mouth. Moving on from that, we're going to focus on our brown details. Now for the cloth on the back, I've begun an overall dry brush highlight of Deathclaw Brown. Once that's done, I'm taking Balor Brown and I'm applying this in select areas where light hits the most. So these little sharp edges and corners here, and just where light would hit the most on the most raised areas. But I've also used the Balor Brown to dry brush very carefully all of the brown wood of his staff, as well as the little wooden bits. There's not much, but the little staff here and there. Moving on from that, we're going to focus on the Sigvald Burgundy details. And just like before, I've done an overall, very careful applied dry brush of Pink Horror, being very careful not to catch the edges here. So this is the Sigvald Burgundy here, and then the capes on these two. Once that's done, I've taken Pink Horror, and I've done a more refined dry brush over the Sigvald Burgundy areas, like the brown areas where light hits the most. So aiming this way, you can see you've got these sharper corners here where light hits the most, and that's where I've applied it. Moving on from that one, I'm taking Blue Horror. Now applying this dry brush very carefully over all these raised areas where he's got gaping open wounds. So it's where that Pterodon turquoise and Archelian green was applied. It's these outer raised edges, as you can see. And I've also given just a dry brush over the tentacles, just because it really blends in nicely with that colour. So this is all the Blue Horror all applied on these as well. Moving on from that one, focusing on this flame. If you've included the flame Nurgling, I've taken Phalanx Yellow and I've done a cheeky dry brush just over the flames. Gives it a slight yellowish tint, really works nicely. And then moving on from that one, for all the gaping open flesh that we did in Volupus Pink over the Darko flesh, I'm giving a little dry brush of Flayed One flesh. This includes the tongue, all the skin that you can see here, all this open exposed flesh, but I've also applied it over the mushrooms. It just gives it a more fleshy tone, as you can see. I've done it here. And we will go in with a bit more, perhaps a little bit of Blood for the Blood God at the end, but that's where I've applied that one. The next four paints are the last ones that we can use for dry brushing Rotigus. So to begin with, I'm taking Rust Grey. And on Rotigus, you can simply dry brush this over the Black Templar ropes that we did on these trinkets. Now on the actual Nurglings, I've done it on all of their horns. I've done it on the insectoid arm of this one, and I've done it on the sword of this one. And that completes the Rust Grey. Moving on from Rust Grey, I'm taking Skarsnik Green. I've applied this over select areas. So to begin with, on Rotigus, I've done it over the green of the staff, but I've also dry brushed a tiny bit on the brown, just where the green meets the brown, to create that kind of transition. On the Nurglings, I've just simply given a very careful dry brush over their skin. You don't really notice it. It is a very subtle highlight because they're very similar in tones, but it does give them a slight highlight. And that's done on those two as well. Moving on from that one, I'm taking Screaming Skull, and I'm applying this over quite a few different areas. So to begin with, all of Rotigus' fingernails and toenails. Moving on from his toenails, I've done a very gentle dry brush over each of the spots. It's not really to give him a real highlight, it's just to buff the colour, just to show a bit of a light catching them. I've included the actual Nazdreg yellow pus spots as well, so this is both the yellow ones and the green ones. As well as that, I've dry brushed the base, stir the mud, so if you've done the same, I've dry brushed it in that as well. Just makes sense having it there. And then finally, I'm taking Necron Compound, and I'm dry brushing this over some of the silver details, not all of them. So the only ones I'm not doing are the little staple clips that are in this head scarf, head cloth, because if you do that, you're going to catch all the Sigfold Burgundy details we've done, and it's going to spoil. So on this Nurgling, you can absolutely dry brush the Necron compound here, turning him around. I've got all this chainmail here, which is good for dry brushing. And if you've done this Nurgling, you've got the little chain here that you can dry brush. Also to note, you've got these spots here as well that I've just seen. That was done in Screaming Skull. And that's all of our dry brushing done. We've just got a few more details to highlight by hand. Our final highlights are nice and simple. It's just our remaining metallic details. So to begin with, I'm taking Ironbreaker, and this is just a very small line just to go on all of the metallic staples just to make them pop. Next up, I'm using Canoptic Alloy, and I'm using this to highlight all of our bronze details. So these are the 3 trinkets, the skulls that you see around his cloth, and you've got the little bits on the Nurgling. So that's all of our Runelord brass and all of our Balthazar gold details. Once that's done, that's technically all of our highlights complete. What I'm going to add next is a couple of texture paints, just to really make Rotigus stand out even more. My first texture paint I'm using is Blood for the Blood God, and what I've done here is taken a very small, very old battered brush. It was a small layer brush and a base brush that's just really frayed and frazzled. It's got no use in painting other than stirring or stippling, and stippling is exactly what I've done here. Got a small amount, worked it like a dry brush, and I've just stippled it into all of this raw exposed flesh that you find in all of the gaping open wounds. Just gives it a slightly more red tinted blooded look, which is exactly what you'd expect to see on something as horrible as this. Just really adds to the model. If you've seen my Death Guard tutorials before, you'll understand exactly what's going on here, but we're creating a small mix for our next texture. Now I'm taking 2 parts Briar Queen Chill, and I'm mixing it with 1 part of Nailac Oxide. This is going to be for verdigris effects. Now if you want to understand the full reasoning behind why I'm making this mix, go and check out my Lord of Poxes tutorial, as well as the Plague Burst Crawler. I explain it in great detail there. It's all about control. But quite simply, we're taking this verdigris colour and applying it over the bronze details in select areas. So look for recesses where verdigris would occur. It's nice and simple as that. My next texture technique is to apply some rust effect colour to the chainmail armour, and I've done it on the actual bits of metal that the Nurglings are holding as well. Now the colour I'm using here is Trollslayer Orange, and I've thinned it down into a sort of glaze mix with Lahmian Medium. We're roughly talking 3 parts Lahmian Medium, 1 part Trollslayer Orange, and it's no real overall application. The more illogical you apply it, the better it looks. We're just applying it and dabbing it just randomly over the metal just to create a random rusting effect, and that makes it just look a bit more Nurglified. Next up, we're adding to the eyes, and the paint I'm using here is Mortarion Green Clear. This is one of the Citadel air paints that Games Workshop sells, but it's just a small amount I've applied on the tip of a paintbrush and just applied it around the eyes. Gives it this much more vivid, sickly green vibe, which is exactly what we want for Nurgle. Now just beware, as an air paint, this takes a lot longer to dry than a normal traditional paint. Even longer than shade paints and contrast paints. So it's going to be very sticky, very tacky for a while. Just let it dry naturally before applying anything else or touching any area around it. And next up, I'm taking Evil Sun Scarlet, and I'm just applying little spot highlights on the Nurgling eyes. So you've got this one, not him, he's got metallic bug eyes. You've got 2 eyes on this one. If you're doing this one, he's got 1 eye, and then 2 eyes on that one. Nice and simple, just little dots. Now once that's done, we're going back to a technical paint, and this time I'm using Ardcoat, and I'm fitting this down rather heavily. So I've used the Citadel Skull palette. I've used the biggest section that you can do a mix in, and I've created 1 part Ardcoat and 3 parts Lahmian Medium. Quite simply, I've applied it all over, mixed together, over the entire model. Now Ardcoat is a gloss varnish, but in this concentrated mix, what we end up with is a satin varnish, which gives it a nice sheen across the model. It's a bit hard to see in this light, but essentially Rotigus, he is one big slimy dirty boy, and he's going to have natural liquids all over him, Gloss varnish would be too bright, too glossy, too shiny. It just would spoil the model, whereas a satin finish just gives it a natural sheen that it looks a little bit wet. And that's the effect that I want, and that's the effect that you get with that. So just a reminder, 3 parts Lamy medium, 1 part hard coat to turn the gloss varnish into a satin varnish. And finally, and it really is finally now, it wouldn't be Nurgle without a bit of Nurgle's rot added to the base. That lovely snot textured colour that just makes it even more disgusting when it was already disgusting enough. No real logic here, I've just applied it in random blobs just to texture the base and make it look absolutely filthy. All we need to do now, for me personally, is just add a few grass tufts because our model is done. And there we have it. A box art coloured Rotigus is fully complete, and personally I am just so very proud of it. From starting this fantastic hobby back in 2019, I have wanted to paint Rotigus for a very long time, but I never picked him up because I had no clue on actually how to paint him, and I'm one of those people that has a very literal mind in that it just had to be exactly like the box art colours, and there's just never been an actual guide, not from Warhammer Official or from anyone else. Until now, of course. So anyone like myself, this one is for you. Now there's a lot of complexity at first glances, but it's actually pretty straightforward, this guide. It's absolute proof of how my own personal experience with contrast paints really helps me identify and create these complicated schemes, which aren't actually complicated, but just match the box art matching colours. And it's experience and practice in general that anyone can absolutely achieve. And that's why I'm sure this tutorial has provided great inspiration, and if so, please ensure you spend that precious moment of time just to give it a like. Share to help others who would really benefit from this tutorial, and subscribe to see more, because supporting me means I get to support you, the awesome Warhammer community. And once again, a huge heartfelt thank you to all 3,000 followers on Instagram. I really, really appreciate it. Until the next time, do look after yourselves, and happy hobbying.